everyone. Welcome to our English conversation program. This is Katsuaki Togo.
I'm Beth Higgins.
Inviting you to join us for the guest hour for the next 15 minutes.
Hello, everyone. It's so nice to be with you today. Our guest this month is Miss Patricia Massy, a freelance writer and columnist. Let's see what she has to say.
Welcome to our program, Miss Massy. It's so nice of you to come all the way from Nagano.
It's a pleasure to be here today. Hello, everyone.
Well, we'd like to ask some questions about your background by way of introduction for the first half of this program. Then for the second half, we'd like to concentrate on your major field of professional interest, that is Japanese crafts, and also your comments on what you find beautiful in Japan. Okay, may I begin by asking why you decided to come to Japan?
Well, it was really by accident. I was studying art in university in North Carolina, and as a kind of minor, I took up Eastern civilizations, in particular Japan. So when I was a senior and I was thinking what I should do with myself, I wanted to go abroad, and my professor of Japanese civilization said, well, why don't you go to Japan? I thought that was a good idea, and in that case I could take up my interest in sumie, which I had studied as art history. But at that time, I didn't realize that the age of sumie was already past, so I was a little discouraged when I arrived. Well, you've been here in Japan for a long time, I think, so would you mind my asking what you've been doing over here? That's a good question. Well, Japan is a fascinating country. There's enough to study here for a lifetime, at least I think so. So, as I said, I came to take up painting, sumie in particular, and as I couldn't find a teacher that I admired, or should I say respected, I decided to take up calligraphy, and then that led to other things. For instance, katazome, and tea ceremony, and on. And one study led to another, and here I am today still studying. 17 years of studying.
Did you take any lessons in sumie then, or?
No, I never did, because I felt very strongly that unless I truly admired the teacher, the teacher's techniques, that I wouldn't be able to follow him like a good student should. That if I found something that, well, let's put it this way, if I felt that I could draw something better than he could, I would never want to be told by him or her what to do. Personally, I would have liked to be taught by now to say something. But one just doesn't become a student of mine to say something. Do you do any similar paintings now? I don't know, but I do a lot of sketching, drawing. I hope eventually to get back to my original purpose in coming to Japan.
Okay, and I understand, Miss Massy, that you are living not in Tokyo, but in Nagano. May I ask what made you choose that particular place to live in?
Well, I had been living in Kamakura, which is a very, very nice place. But, well, as you know, everything around Tokyo is very, very expensive. Even the rents are very expensive. And I found that I was working just to pay the rents. And I couldn't even live in a house that I found convenient for my own work. So I finally had to face reality and decide what to do with myself. If I'm just going to live in Japan to pay rents, there's no reason to be in Japan anymore. Therefore, I started looking around in the countryside for some suitable place, which is not too far away from Tokyo, and yet has a lot of natural beauty. And Nagano was my choice finally.
Good.
When you're in Nagano, what do you like to do there? Well, I went to the mountains this year thinking I would have plenty of time to dream and paint, to think, to look at the mountains and the trees and the flowers. But actually, I spend a lot of time cutting firewood to keep warm in the winter. I'm very, very busy in the winter cutting firewood, in the summer cutting grass. I think Japan is a land of weeds. I find myself cutting the weeds every 3 days or so.
I'm sure that helps you fit.
Yes, as a matter of fact, it does. I think I've become very, very healthy since I moved out, and I'm very glad I made the decision.
And you're known for being a columnist on the Japanese crafts for the Japan Times. And can you tell us a bit more about your column?
That's right. I do write about crafts. I mentioned before that I did do some katazome, and that eventually led into my writing about Japanese crafts. I've been doing this for some 10 years now. Originally I was writing every week, but I found that I couldn't do a really good job on each person I interviewed, so I finally went to 1 monthly column, which is what I'm doing now. It's called Crafts and Craftsmen.
How did you get the ideas of your writing? Or
the ideas, well, I did meet a lot of people before I started writing, so I had a basis for that. But nowadays, I hear about people, or I see people on NHK, or I go to an exhibition, for instance, the Dento Kogeten, which was just held last month, and then I see somebody's work that I particularly admire, and I contact that person. Well, Japan has so many wonderful craftsmen that I could keep on writing for decades, I'm sure. Are there any particular difficulties about writing about Japanese crafts in the English language? Yes, there are. Well, some of the techniques, for instance, are typically Japanese, and they're very difficult to explain in English. If you're writing in Japanese, even if you don't understand the particular technique, you just say, well, this is nakanuri, for instance. Well, you don't know what nakanuri is, and maybe your reader doesn't know either, but it sounds all right. But if you're writing in English, you have to explain what nakanuri is. So you do a lot of research. Sometimes I find that Japanese books that are supposed to be technical books don't give very good information. They just rely on these technical terms without an explanation at all. Another problem is a very simple word like kasuri. If we're writing in Japanese, we say it's a kasuri technique. Where if it's in English, we have to go from the very beginning and explain how kasuri is made. So I lose a whole paragraph of space describing kasuri before I can even get into discussing the certain work done by this person.
Yes, I once read your article about sashimono. I found it very difficult, to put that into, in proper English. Because I understand what it means, because sashimono itself is Japanese. But in what area of, say, arts and crafts do you think you're most interested in?
Probably textiles, because I myself was doing stem cell dyeing, and not too much work has been done in the textile arts. However, the past year or two, a lot of books have come out on kasuri, on shibori. In fact, the writers of the book on shibori suggested that shibori become an international word, because there's no proper word in English or any other language for these techniques. Usually we say tie and dye, but shibori is not only tie and dye. Some of the shibori techniques require blocks, binding with blocks and making a resist in that way. So shibori will be an English word in the near future. Probably Cassidy will be too.
That's interesting to know.
I suppose because you're very interested in crafts, you must travel a lot in Japan and perhaps other places, in other countries as well. Would you mind sharing some of your traveling experiences with us? Yes, I do a lot of traveling. I think I have traveled to almost every prefecture in Japan. I haven't been to Hokkaido yet. When I travel, I do have interesting experiences, but I travel mainly, I think, for the joy of the freshness of experiences. I think this is why poets like to travel, why Basho went on the Okuno Hosomichi. Even very everyday, ordinary things suddenly have a new meaning. The sound of the bird seems to be all the sweeter. The smell of the air is stronger. The color of the sunlight. Even the way the laundry is hanging in the sunshine looks beautiful if you're going to a new place. Also, in finding these different craftsmen, I have sometimes gone to very faraway places, such as the Totsugawa area of Okuyoshima in the prefecture. I had to walk 3 hours from the bus stop. And it was a joy to walk along that road because no cars passed. Actually, I'd hoped that somebody would pick me up along the way, but it was such a lovely walk that I enjoyed every minute of it. Far below there was a ravine with very clear water, and far above were the high peaks, and beautiful birds were flying nearby. And when I arrived at this village, I was very surprised to find that there were only 6 children in the elementary school. And I could see why, because the land is so steep that people can't do any farming there. Actually, people kneel on the mountainside to farm. It's so steep, you don't have to bend over.
Well, you seem to know a lot more about the remotest corner of the country. Well, let me change the subject slightly, and I understand that you've been teaching English. Well, you at least have the personal experience of teaching in this country, and can you say, tell us a bit about your experiences, or say anything that you might find helpful for our listeners?
Yes, I did teach a long time, actually 15 years I taught at a women's university. I think I started teaching like many teachers do, American teachers do, that is with very little experience, and that I had none whatsoever. And I found it very, very upsetting that my students didn't answer immediately when I asked them a question. I think most teachers have this problem. So the first thing I taught them was to say, I'm sorry, I don't understand. And that gives them time then to think about the answer, or to have the answer, the question repeated. In general, I think the best way to learn English is by hearing. And for that reason, these English language programs of NHK, I think, are excellent. I myself have found that in learning Japanese, if I have heard a word, I don't forget it. But if I read a word, I shall forget it unless I hear it again.
Well, Miss Massy, I'm afraid that's all the time we have today, and would you mind coming again next Saturday?
I would love to.
Thank you, Miss Massy, for being with us, and we look forward to talking with you again soon. And this concludes the guest hour. So long, everyone.
Bye for now. Goodbye.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our English conversation program. How are you? I hope you're fine. I'm very delighted to be back presenting the second half of our guest hour. Here with me is
Beth Higgins. Hi, everyone, and welcome back. This week, we'll be continuing our discussion with Miss Patricia Massy, who is a freelance writer and columnist. Let's see what she has to say. it's very nice to have you with us again for the guest star, Miss Massy. And my apologies for slightly mispronouncing your name.
That's all right.
Before asking any questions, I'd like to sum up for the audience what was said last week. First, Miss Massy writes frequently about Japanese crafts, and for this reason she often travels around Japan. And last week she described some of her travels for us. She also mentioned some difficulties in explaining Japanese crafts in the English language. Patricia, it's very nice to have you with us again today, and welcome back.
Thank you. I'm very happy to have this opportunity to be with you again.
I'd like to begin today by asking you some questions about a subject which you suggested to us, and that is Japan's traditional beauty in daily life and in the environment as well. Would you please give us some comments on this?
Well, I think that anyone who has studied anything about Japan finds that there was a great deal of beauty in pre-Meiji Japan in every aspect of daily life. If we, for instance, go to Shiryokan in any little village, we find that the utensils for daily living, the clothing, even the houses were very, very pretty, were very beautiful. I wouldn't like to use the word pretty because that sometimes means pretty. They were beautiful. The Minka Inn, for instance, in Kawasaki, every one of those houses is a masterpiece of architectural design, although some of the houses were very poorly built. When I say poorly built, I mean that the materials were poor. The people were very poor people. They didn't even have enough wood to make a wooden floor, for instance. They had to put straw on the earthen floor and sit on that. But the house itself is beautiful in line and form. Beauty is difficult to describe, but as I just said, line and form, I think that is probably the basis of beauty in any culture, harmony of line and form. And also harmony with the environment. In particular, Japanese craftsmen and designers were able to combine natural materials with the human needs. That is why I think that Chanyu has such a great appeal to Western people who have never been to Japan and really don't know anything about the rituals of tea ceremony. They still find the tea room extraordinarily beautiful, and the utensils are all beautiful. We don't have to explain why they are beautiful. Anybody who looks at them thinks that way. Unfortunately, though, I think that the countryside is no longer picturesque. We wouldn't want to make a painting of Tokyo, I think, in the same way that the artists of pre-Meiji Japan or even in Meiji Japan could do. In the final analysis, however, I think that the biggest difference between pre-Meiji Japan and post-war Japan is a difference in the concept of life. That it's not only materials, but also the fact that it seems to me the Japanese of former days tried to make life poetic.
Well, Miss Massy, then, what do you suggest we do, say, to preserve and protect the traditional beauty of Japan in your terms?
That's a big problem.
I know, but
I don't know. The really beautiful places that we see on calendars that are shown as being the Japan, these are places that are commercialized now, kinkakuji, ginkakuji, etc., etc. They're not part of the daily life anymore. They will be preserved because they make money. What is not being preserved is the beauty of daily life. And it really distresses me to see how Japanese follow
Western things without any understanding of these things that they follow. If Japanese people would just retain the basis of living, not the actual way of life, but the basis. In other words, what is beautiful in life. If they would keep that and put into their daily life, that would preserve a lot of the beauty.
But on the other hand, I've always been impressed in Japan by the great attention shown, for example, to utensils used in the tea ceremony, or a variety of crafts, and, for example, the government having national treasures and supporting them in that way, which I think is a bit unusual.
It is very unusual, and it's wonderful that the government is doing this, but at the same time, these crafts are beyond the means of the average person. These Ningen Kokoho crafts, unfortunately. We cannot afford them, we cannot put them in our daily life, and tea ceremony is not daily life any longer.
I see. Well, getting back to Mr. Tubble's question for just a second, do you have any ideas about protecting Japan's beauty?
Well, what I would like to see, let's go into the environment, right? In other words, houses, the beautiful old houses we find in the countryside and that are being torn down all the time. I would like to see the government giving special loans to people to renovate their houses. Instead, if people want to have a loan to build, they cannot use any of the old materials in a house to get a government loan. It has to be a brand new house.
I see.
So that helps to destroy Japanese homes instead of preserving them. There is, for instance, near where I live, a beautiful old village. And where all the houses are old, but the people can't possibly renovate them and keep them up without a loan.
I see what you're saying. Do you think that there are situations in other countries which are similar to the situation in Japan?
As for housing, I really wouldn't know. I know the English people are very keen on preserving the appearance of their old villages and of their old homes. For instance, there's a village near Oxford called Chippenhampton, where all the houses have been renovated, and any new house has to be built in the same style, and the style is 15th century. These people do it without any government help. It is, as I understand it anyway, they do it because they treasure their history and their heritage.
Well, Miss Massy, by way of preserving, say, Japanese traditional beauty, is there anything that we can do in the area of, say, arts and crafts in everyday life?
Well, I would like people to, the Japanese word is minao, Japanese crafts. In other words, to use these things in their daily life, not just to have it something separate as in tea ceremony, something used only when guests come or on special
make it
occasions.
part of daily life.
It is my belief that if you use something that has been made by hand, you will take good care of it. You don't want to break it, and of course, as you use it, you learn to appreciate it. You find out its good points and its bad points. Whenever anyone asks me, is this a good teacup, for instance, I say, well, why don't you use it and find out?
Crafts almost sound like your friends.
Yes, they are. They have the warmth of the person, and they have the warmth in them of the person who made them.
Yes, and that's the sort of thing we can do because it doesn't cost a lot of money. You know, it just depends on the way we look at it.
Good crafts are not necessarily expensive.
I understand that you've been involved in organizing special tours for foreign residents and tourists who are interested in Japanese traditions.
And I'd like to ask their reaction to the tours, and do they make any particular comments about Japanese traditional beauty?
Yes, I have taken people on pottery tours, and we've been to Kiso and various other places. Of course, they all find Japanese crafts outstanding. Perhaps at the moment, Japanese crafts are the best in the world. Certainly, there are more craftsmen in Japan than in any other country, I should think. But most people also share my feelings that Japanese do not thoroughly appreciate their own culture, that they're throwing away, they're destroying something that is so beautiful, that it has taken generations and generations to build up. We cannot learn to make these things. We cannot make these houses in just one generation. It takes hundreds of years. But the sad thing is, it can all be lost in one generation.
So, Ms. Massy, in the final analysis, could I ask this question? What do you think is the significance of crafts or handwork in German terms?
Oh, well, it's really difficult to answer because its significance is quite deep. One thing, however, is the tradition involved that I have just been talking about. We have hundreds and hundreds of years behind one particular article. If, for instance, I were lost in a forest and I had to make a living for myself, I had to feed myself and get everything for myself, I wouldn't know what to do. I wouldn't know how to make something out of clay. Well, maybe I might be able to do something a little bit because I have interviewed craftsmen who are potters. But I would really be at a loss to make a good pot that's going to hold water for me. And I wouldn't know how to make a good bowl from which to eat. I wouldn't know how to make waraji to put on my feet. All of these things have taken a long time to develop. Even if it's only just to keep this.
And by utilizing limited natural resources.
Right. All of these things, the crafts use natural resources without polluting the world. And at the same time, they require human ingenuity and talent. Even such a simple thing as waraji are a thing of great beauty and of great talent as well.
I assume you would think that preserving crafts is also preserving the environment at the same time.
Exactly right.
But it might look a little odd to be working with waraji in the Tokyo space.
Well, that's true. I wouldn't think that waraji are very useful today, but it is something I would like people to remember. It should remain part of us. But for instance, just sewing with a needle and thread. In America, we learn in high school how to use a sewing machine. But we never learn how to use a needle and thread. So when I was doing katazome, I had to sew a piece of cloth onto the end of the tamuno. And I couldn't sew a straight line. And my teacher laughed at me because it was all wavy. Just that simple thing.
Yes, Ms. Massy. So I agree totally that, we have to preserve the wisdom of the older generation.
The right word.
Well, time is almost up, and we have to conclude the program by saying thank you very much once again for coming to talk to us. And I'm sure our listeners enjoyed every moment of this session.
It was a pleasure. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye.
担当は東後勝明先生。お相手はベサ